if you could take us back, Maisie, to the start of your career, whether it's through childhood education or even just the early phases of your the jobs that you'd worked at in design, and just lead us through that, and we can then just start to hear your backstory, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I think I've listened to quite a few of these, and I feel like, it's what a lot of people say, but I was, that kid that was always kind of drawing, always creating things, always kind of making up stories and things like that. I found a picture the other day of me creating this snail fashion magazine, which I used to draw with my sister. So, all the usual stuff growing up, really. But I think what was a little bit different for me was that my dad was actually a graphic designer. So I actually knew about the design industry and kind of knew it was a career a lot sooner on than I think a lot of people. I know that I've heard of people who only knew about it kind of at college age and things like that. But I kind of knew that graphic design was a career, like right from the get-go, really, before I had any idea what graphic design was. But I think it was like the studio environment that I loved about it. So, there's days when I'd be sick from school or just have to nip to my dad's studio after school and things like that. And I remember just absolutely loving like the feel of that studio buzz. I loved like being around all of these different creative people. I loved kind of feeling like, you were surrounded by all of this amazing creative work, and I loved all of that. So yeah, I used to kind of really know that I wanted to be in that creative field and in an environment that was around people like that kind of growing up. And I think as I got older and started to know what my dad did a bit more, I kind of thought, oh, that sounds quite interesting. But really I wanted to go into advertising. I loved adverts. I used to like learn all of these different adverts. I knew who was creating what adverts when, like growing up, I was so passionate about it all. And then I was kind of picking GCSEs, things like that. I was picking art and English and, really focusing down and wanting to go into this creative field. And I think at that point I was given the Smile in the Mind book, which I know a lot of people have kind of referenced as one of their pivotal books. But, for me, it kind of captured everything that I loved. It had the ideas, it was about joy, it was about humour, it was about kind of connecting people and making people want to be part of something. And I think all of that just really resonated with me, and was like, no, this is what I want to be doing. So this was kind of sixth form age-ish. I'd kind of thought, no, I definitely want to go into graphic design. And luckily, obviously, my dad knew a lot about it. And so he took me down to the D&AD New Blood exhibitions. So I don't know if anyone knows about this or doesn't know about this, but basically all the different unis kind of put up their best work from the year and kind of really highlight their graduates to the industry. But for me, it was amazing because I could go down and see all the different tutors, all of the work they produced, what all these different unis were all about. I just had such a clear idea, even at that age, of kind of what I wanted to be doing. So I applied to Falmouth Uni, and actually it was the only uni that I applied to. I was like very much all my eggs in one basket. I was like, do you know what, this is what I want to be. I want to be by the sea. Love the tutors, love the place. So luckily got in. Had a bit of a backup plan, but didn't have to use it, so it was all good. So I got in, and then I spent 3 years by the sea studying graphic design, which I just absolutely loved. I had the best time there. People were great, so talented, and the tutors were incredible. And I think really got what the kind of design that I liked as well. Like, it was very ideasy at that time, particularly. This was 10 years ago now, so it was very much about that kind of clever logo design thing going on at the time. And I loved that and got so into it and had a brilliant time. And then during my second year of uni, I applied to do a few different placements. And that was so beneficial to me. I don't know what kind of ages people here are in the call, but I think, the sooner you can get out and be doing placements, the better. So if anyone is at uni and kind of on the fence about it, it's just so beneficial for me. And I did 4 placements in my second year summer of uni, one of which being at B&B Studio and one of which being at JKR, which are, spoilers, the 2 agencies that I then went on to work at. So, even, JKR work at now, but this was 8 years before then. And I'd kind of got in there and made connections and met people. And that was just so invaluable. And I think, I did a mixture of different placements. I did them at a mixture of different agencies, and I think it really helped me gauge what kind of work I wanted to be doing, what kind of size studio I wanted to be working at, all of these different things that hopefully fed into my career and kind of led me to where I am now. So yeah, I did those placements in my second year, went back to uni for a year and kind of focused a bit more on packaging and branding. And then in my final year, I was due to go back to B&B on placement. And actually the week before, they got in touch and said, we're hiring a junior designer. Do you want to come in for a chat about that instead? And I was like, yes, of course. Like, this doesn't happen to anyone. Like, it's just incredible. Like, they could have just waited till I went on placement and then, you know, had me as cheap labour for a month, but they didn't. And they actually offered me the job the Friday before I was due to start on the Monday as a placement. So I had a very quick kind of change of round of my mental, what I was doing, and started on that Monday as a junior designer. No one else in the team knew that I was a junior designer. They all thought I was a placement still. So kind of came in all like, yeah, I'm going to move near the studio, and like thinking that everyone knew that I worked there, and no one did. So I just looked like a really over keen intern. But you know, I probably was as well. So yeah, I worked at B&B for 7 years, and if people don't know B&B Studio, it works, they work a lot with startups, and they work with challenger brands. So it's all kind of people who've got an idea of a product or have made a product and are at that point where they've just got a bit of an investment for branding, but not tons of money. And we came up with name creation, full brand creation, and most of the time kind of launched them into supermarkets and things like that. It was a lot of packaging generally. And it was great. I loved it. I think it was very fast paced, and we worked with a lot of incredible entrepreneurs and founders. And I think, you know, meeting the people behind all of these brands was really, really interesting. And you've realized that, you know, what you were creating was someone's like baby, and you had to kind of respect it to a certain degree. You couldn't just do whatever you wanted to do and hope it landed, because, you know, they'd been putting their time, their money into this product, and they were relying on you to kind of make it sell. So I think that gave me a different perspective and kind of made me realize what the job was all about. And you could kind of see those tangible results, like Pip and Nut, for example. We worked with them when they first came out, and we worked with them for about 10 years, I think. And in that time, they went from being nothing to being valued at millions of pounds. And I think when you can see that kind of tangible growth from nothing, it really gives you a bit of a perspective on what you're doing. So yeah, loved all that. Worked there for 7 years, and then in the past year decided it was time for a bit of a change. Wanted to keep growing, and wanted to see what else was out there and kind of see what global brands were like, and kind of move away a little bit from these challenger startups. And so got a job at JKR. And also I kind of want to move away from packaging to a certain degree. I think, you know, it's good for a certain time, but there are a lot of restrictions that you have with packaging that can become a little bit tiring. And I think I just wanted to move a little bit more into maybe a bit more digital space, a bit more of this AR, virtual reality and all of that world, and kind of just see what else is out there, really. Wow. And that's where I'm at now.
Brilliant. That's amazing. Yeah, there's so much to pick up from that. I wanted to go back to the placement when you were at uni. Mm-hmm. For anybody, I don't know if I think maybe our audience is a little bit older than that, but for anybody that recaps on this, I imagine that the placements, I never experienced university, but I imagine the placement things, it could be easy just to think it's a place to go and get creative experience. But as you sort of touched on there, that's so much deeper than that, isn't it? From making connections, building a network, starting that process of getting your name out there. Is that what you experienced to get that first role? It was much more than just maybe just working on the Mac. It was the 100%. Intricacies of being in a studio.
100%. And a placement is, you know, I think it's a little bit of a cliche, but a placement is all about personality, especially at that age. You know, they're not expecting you to come in and blow them away. And actually, I think if you come in a bit too cocky, it can kind of put people's back up a little bit. You know, you're not there to kind of save them or come up with this amazing work. You know, they're talented designers and they can do that themselves. But I think to be there and to be interested and to be passionate and to be learning about, you know, the company and what they're all about and the values and whether you align with them. That's for me what a placement's kind of valuable for, and what both parties can kind of gain from it. I think you go in, I think it's interesting seeing it from the other side and seeing the kind of benefits of having placements in and having that kind of breath of fresh air and having people be really excited about your work again. And I think as a placement yourself, you're going in and just kind of thinking what you can gain from them, but equally they kind of want to know what they can gain from you. So I think it is that two-way street and seeing if you kind of click. And then, like I say, I did one at JKR, so it was 9 years ago now, and I'm working there now, and people still remember me from that placement, and actually it was part of the reason why I got that job. So, you know, if you make a good impression, those connections will kind of come back and remember you and remember. I mean, I was so keen and I think that kind of rubbed off and just made people think, like, you know, she's passionate about what she's doing. And even though I didn't create anything worth anything at that point, they knew that I was keen to in the future and would kind of get those skills eventually.
Yeah, and I think also that the idea of a network is sometimes deemed to be a bit more of a corporate world thing, isn't it? But even in our, I don't think creative people like the word network. I think it's just one of those sort of things that we sort of jar against. But it is very important, isn't it, to begin that process early. I didn't do it till a lot later in my career. I wish it's something I was encouraged to do more. But, you know, to build up that sort of just a group of people, whether they're mentors or somebody you can join a conversation with on LinkedIn, or just have a reference point, is vital, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. And I think it can feel a little bit intimidating. I think, like, sometimes you go on Twitter and you see the same people talking to the same people, and you kind of get this image that, you know, the design industry is really closed off and doesn't want to allow people into it. But actually, my experience of it has been the complete opposite. And I think if you go out there and you're like, do you know what, I want to be part of this, let me in.
Yeah.
I think
you've got to fight your way through, haven't you? You've got to fight for that space, haven't you, to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Just keep writing stuff until they eventually notice.
Yeah, but yeah, it's difficult because it can feel daunting, can't it? I think as creators, we're quite sort of we're very conscious about what people think, even though we're constantly putting things in the world. But so,
yeah.
you've got to sort of I think stand your ground a little bit and sort of just continue to chip away at it. And I think people do start to let you in and respect your opinions. Moving on to B&B.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I find out when you mentioned Pippin, I've heard a lot about those guys recently. I think they've expanded into a lot of supermarkets in the last sort of quarter. When you talked about with working with entrepreneurs, it made me sort of think, as you were saying it, I've never thought about it this way, but in like working for, say, a general manager of a huge corporate client, and they're sort of just ticking boxes as they go along. That must be such a different experience working with entrepreneurs, where, like you say, that's their life, isn't it? They maybe invested their savings into something, or they have generated horrific amounts of money to sort of see a product through from a conception to being on the shelf. Is there an extra sense of pressure with that? Or do you have to sort of try and eliminate that?
I mean, I think I was lucky at the age I was there that the pressure wasn't necessarily on me. But I do think it led to, I think it was very emotion-led in a way. And I think sometimes you do entire concept presentations, but, when you presented it back to them, it just wasn't what they exactly had in their head. And I think, rightly so, they were very precious about what they'd created. And I think it led to, I'd say, kind of gut reactions sometimes. And I think now that I'm working somewhere bigger, I think I can see the process a little bit more, and I can see that there's things in place that kind of stop you from going crazy or kind of bring you in line. Whereas there was none of that. You could do whatever you wanted. And I think sometimes that led to things maybe going off in a different way to the way the client was expecting, or, just them just not in their heart loving it for some reason, but could never pinpoint why. There's quite a lot of that conversation. That was when it went wrong. A lot of the time it went right. A lot of the work came out really well, but it did lead to a bit more of an emotional experience, I'd say, rather than a kind of objective one.
Yeah, it's a difficult balance, isn't it? It's the idea of having processes so strict that you follow it by the books, and you can feel a little bit hemmed in, to having all of the the freedom in the world to do what you like, but then not really having that process then to rein you in. It's quite a hard thing. I think I personally like the idea of having the freedom just to sort of quite, float around and come up with ideas, but that doesn't really adhere to people paying for work, does it? But was there the B&B model, the studio as it stood at the time, was that based on that? So they were trying to attract those, did they intentionally try to attract those sort of clients, entrepreneurs, and
yeah, definitely,
because they had that sort of approach that sort of attracted people that was similar, I suppose, clients in their mental state.
Yeah, it was very much about these kind of challenger brands, and it was about setting out to disrupt. I think obviously when you've got a product that on paper might be the same as a kind of market leader. So I remember one product that we worked for was a ketchup brand. And, coming in to go against Heinz, like you've really got to have that challenger mentality, and you've got to be doing something different, and you've got to kind of give people a reason to buy what you're selling. So a lot of what we did was about purpose, and a lot of it was about communicating that purpose on shelf and kind of showing that they're doing something different, which, yeah, again, got clients that are doing that. But, it is a massive risk. And I think, safe design is where you can kind of take what's going on in a certain category and make something look like that category. And I think that's something that, is relatively easy to do and relatively easy to learn. But I think when you're taking that category and then trying to subvert it, but make it recognizable enough that people are still buying it, that's when the real challenge would kind of come in. And that's what we were up against quite a lot of the time, it was really interesting. I loved it. And I think the creative work there was incredible. I don't think I'm going to get that creative freedom again, because you do only get it with those clients. But like I say, the kind of flip side of that is that it was a lot of hard work, and you're kind of constantly creating, and because they don't have big budgets, you're working on them kind of back to back. So you're constantly like thinking the whole time, and then you might not kind of see stuff come out at the end of it because it might not get into supermarkets, or it might have to change to fit into Tesco, whatever it is. So there are definite pros and cons of it, but it was a great learning curve.
That must be quite relentless, not be quite exhausting, wouldn't it? I would imagine that having to do that endlessly must be quite taxing from a creative, mental, physical perspective.
Yeah, there was not many kind of down periods. And I think it's great because it's kind of taught me that I think the trickiest part of the job quite early on. so now when I do get a kind of a down period, I really enjoy it. And when I'm just moving things around, I'm like, oh, this is a relief.
Just before we move on to JK, Kat Hughes has just dropped a question. And what kinds of things do you have to learn in the studio that university didn't cover?
There was definitely I think the initial thing that you notice is the pace, and I think you have to learn to be fast. But I think a lot more of it is, I'd say, you have the things like software, and you have the things that you just have to kind of learn as you go along. But I think a lot more of it is the mental side of it, and I think I certainly had got to a place where I'd kind of done well at school, I'd done well at uni, I'd felt like I was achieving really well. And then I went into an agency with all of these incredible people who had a lot more experience than I had. And suddenly I was kind of up against them, trying to get my work through and trying to create an impact. And I think for me, it was about learning to not be pushing myself so hard so fast, being like, look, you are a junior, you're in here to learn. It's going to be a good few years before you're creating anything that you're even half proud of. Like, I think for me, it was that mental step back of being like, appreciate your place in this journey, and appreciate that you're not going to be the one who's like winning D&AD pencils a year out of uni. Like, take that time and grow in your craft. And also, like, you just got to get used to the rejection, and you've got to get used to ideas not being right. And I heard this really good thing that I've kept with me that's like, it's like cooking spinach, and like you start off with loads, and through the creative process you end up with like nothing at the end, but hopefully what you've got is this kind of nugget of good stuff. And I don't actually like spinach that much, but you get the idea. And I think learning that you're going to lose things along the way, and not being so precious for me as well, was something that I had to get used to. And it's not just what you want to do, it's what the client wants, it's what the creative director wants, it's what the strategy wants a lot of the time, which I don't really think you have to deal with at uni. You can just kind of do what you want. I think a lot more of it was the mental side for me.
Like saying, the emotional sort of side, it can be difficult, can't it, to swallow the idea that rejection, and it can be like sort of quite endless, can't it? But it's never done, it should never be done in a negative way. It's always to generate the best results, isn't it, for the, like you say, for the job at hand. So it's it's quite a difficult one to get used to, but over time you get that, you understand why, don't you, more, and you start to hone in on your ideas. Moving on to JKR, you moved job during the pandemic, didn't you?
Yeah.
How does that work, and how did you find the motivation, the confidence to do that, and or was it quite a simple sort of decision? Were your arm twisted, so to speak, because of the pandemic, and it was, let's try something new?
Yeah, I think that was it. I think it kind of, there's a few different factors. I've been thinking about it kind of recently, and I think one main factor that I hadn't really considered is that I actually had a Mac at home, and up until that point, I'd always just had one in a studio, and my laptop from uni had broken. I had nothing at home to kind of create with. So in terms of actually getting a portfolio together, like the real practical side of it, finally having a Mac at home actually allowed me, like with access to the server, actually allowed me to get that portfolio together. So from a really practical side, it really helped having this Mac at home. And also going to interviews, like, I didn't have to do any of the, I'm nipping to the doctors or I've got a dentist appointment or anything. You can kind of block your hour out over lunch and have an interview and chat to a few different people as well and see what the kind of vibes are. So I think from that side, the pandemic kind of helped in a way, and also giving you that distance too. I'd been there for 7 years. I love the place. It was very much kind of part of me, and I think I'd very much grown my identity a little bit based on it. And I think then having that step back and kind of seeing it a bit more objectively and kind of thinking, am I still learning? Am I progressing? Just kind of gave me that distance to think, now is the time to kind of push forward. So that bit was the kind of the good side, I'd say, the process. I think the hardest bit was starting a job remotely. And JKR have been very strict on office opening. So it's open at the minute, but only because the government's just relaxed the rules. So basically anytime the government's saying work from home, we've been working from home. And so that led for quite a few months last year of starting remotely. And I think people who've done that for 2 years, or whatever, I don't know how they've done it, because not being able to meet your team and kind of get those dynamics and even just feel like you've joined a new agency. Like I was still just sitting in this chair and working somewhere new, but it didn't ever feel like I'd left in a way. So I think that was the hard bit. And I really enjoy it now that it is open and we can go in and kind of get that studio buzz again and really learn from people.
Yeah, and because of your connection with JKR originally from the placements and that earlier phase, was that an easy decision? Was that an opening that was a public one, or was that something that came through privately, or was it just made easier because you knew of the business and maybe some of the people that were still there?
Yeah, I actually applied to them earlier on. I think it was the January time last year, and they kind of said that my portfolio, that was through a job opening, and they said my portfolio was a bit too packaging based for what they were looking for. And then I had a bit of time where I rejigged my portfolio, put in some different projects, kind of set myself up again. And then I saw the executive creative director, Sean, he tweeted something about them needing more designers because they've just got a load of work in. So I thought, great, let's apply again. So I sent it back in and said, look, I've rejigged it, less packaging, I'd love to chat through it with you again, and then met with them again. So it wasn't a totally smooth process. And I think having, again, that time to kind of set myself up and go for it again was really lucky that they were looking for kind of a few seniors at that time. So I had that time to kind of do that.
That's quite ironic that we were just talking about rejection, or having, when you first step into a studio as a junior or whenever that might be, right? That idea of dealing with the spinach metaphor and it comes down to nothing, but the idea that you applied for something that was rejected, or it was not seen right at the time, but then to keep on going at it because it was something you wanted. I think that's a great sign of sort of what you need to do, isn't it, in this industry, is to keep at it and show strength, how difficult it is at times. Is that something that you've noticed quite a lot in your career, just after the resilience needed?
Yeah, I think I'm just learning to take it all a lot less personally. I could have seen that first one as like, oh, they hate me, I'm not good enough, they don't like me, blah blah. But instead I was like, do you know what, can we have a feedback session? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Had a great feedback Zoom session with the creative director there, and she kind of fed back saying, we like you, but your work isn't quite what we're looking for at the minute. And I think just then to try and take that on board and think, okay, like I had, I don't know, 8 projects I was picking between. I picked 5. Clearly they were the wrong 5. I went, switched them out. And I think, try not to take things personally. And I'm as bad as anyone of thinking that it's all on me and like everything that I do is terrible. But I think if you can take that step back and actually hear what the person is saying and realize that it's not about you and it's just totally objective, then you can kind of learn from that, I think.
Yeah, and a question relating to that, I'm not sure if you've had to answer this one, but how do you prepare for interviews, or how did you prepare for this interview? Maybe more relevant.
So I would always have a portfolio that I'm super kind of happy with. Obviously I had 2 different ones, but I think each time be really proud of what you've created, and only put in projects that kind of back to back, inside out, why you've done what you're doing, and what you were kind of trying to achieve. So I think that's always the first step, is obviously have a portfolio that you're really happy with. And then I think run through it loads, make sure you know what you're going to say, make sure you feel enthusiastic about everything that you're saying. If there's anything you're unsure of, just take it out. Like, they're not going to know. So it's something that they're going to know, but they're really not. And especially at kind of uni age, you can just change the brief sometimes. If it's not quite working for you, then just make it fit. Obviously that's harder when you've got a client and you've got an actual brief, but uni age you can. And then just practice. Think about maybe a few of their questions that they're going to ask you and how you might respond to them. Obviously think why you want to work there. If you've got any questions for them. A big one for me was about this kind of going back into the studio and how that was going to work, and whether it was going to be hybrid. And I guess think about your priorities and what you want to get out of them as much as they want to get out of you as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of thinking about it from the adaptability perspective, because that would have changed obviously just because of the pandemic. That would never have been asked before, would it? So it's sort of you have to think about what's relevant at the time, as well as like you say, what's beneficial to you. Something I'm really, really interested in, Maisie, because it's something that I personally follow as well, is the using creativity for good or social causes, or all sorts of different reasons that making the planet a bit of a better place, especially in today's climate. Is your work with Holly on Think Food Bank, and how that came about. I know of the cause and the reason, but how that sort of came about, and why you guys decided to do what you have done with that.
Yeah, so that actually all came about through an Instagram post. It was in the middle of lockdown. I only knew Holly by name, and I think same for her really. We'd never met or anything like that. And she had written this Instagram post about how during the COVID crisis, food banks were really struggling. A lot more people were shopping online, and kind of just wasn't front of mind. People just weren't donating. And I think we can all appreciate that, we had a lot of other things going on at that time to be thinking about extra things. So I saw this kind of Instagram post, and it was something that really resonated with me. I had exactly the same experience of going shopping and forgetting to donate to the food bank until after I'd left the shop, and seeing that food bank there and thinking like, oh God, like, is there anything on me that I don't need and put into this food bank? So I saw this post and commented on it and said, I agree with this. We'll both write to our supermarkets and see if we can put up kind of extra signage and highlight them a little bit more. And she had written something like, yeah, and if that fails, we'll just go out and sticker them, to like sticker the supermarkets. And it was like literally an Instagram comment from someone I didn't know. But it stayed in my mind. And I remember kind of a week or so later, I was thinking about it still. And I thought, I'm just going to drop her a message and see if there's anything actually in this, and if she wants to do it. So I said, I want to create these stickers. Are you up for it? She's a copywriter, and she's actually just gone freelance, but she's been at Design Bridge for 10 years. And so I knew that she was obviously incredible with words. So I said, like, do you have anything you want them to say? Do you want to be involved? Obviously, no worries if you don't. Do you mind if I do it? All of these different questions. And she said, definitely want to be involved. How about Think Food Bank? Let's go, kind of thing. So I started creating these different stickers. Think Food Bank kind of became a bit of a campaign name. Came up with some more playful ones, things like don't forget you donate spaghetti was always my favourite. But kind of these signposts are kind of key things that food banks really needed at that time, that you could sticker on the supermarket shelves and remind people to buy them at the time rather than when they'd gone past the checkout and it was too late. So yeah, we'd done this, and I sent them back to her and she said, yeah, I love them. Then we created a different set of them in all of these different colours for different supermarkets. And we just kind of, I don't think we really had any idea of it kind of going beyond us two at the start. I kind of think we both kind of posted about it and said, we're stickering our supermarkets. And then we went out and just put a load of stickers everywhere. But I don't think there was any sense of it being like, this is going to turn into a big campaign, or we're going to kind of get other people involved at that point. And then as the interest kind of grew, and we saw more people wanted these sticker sets, we kind of set up this, I think people were paying for like postage and packaging, and we were sending out these sticker sets to them, and they were going out and stickering their own supermarkets as well. And so, yeah, it kind of just grew organically from this initial Instagram post. But I absolutely loved working with Holly. It was such a fun project and such a good experience.
And did you get any response from the supermarkets when you'd written to them? Was it more of a guerrilla campaign in the end?
Yeah, it turned very guerrilla. Unfortunately, yeah, the supermarkets didn't say anything. We did, the Waitrose campaign over Christmas was doing something similar. They had this like give a little love kind of thing, and they picked out some products. So part of us, I think, wants to say we had something to do with that, but I don't think we did. But yeah, unfortunately we didn't get anything from supermarkets, and we sent them stickers after we'd created them, and we wrote them and we kind of put them up and chatted to people within supermarkets. And I think the issue is that they would be receptive within the supermarkets, but there's a lot of a kind of a chain going on, and certain supermarkets didn't have food banks because the Trussell Trust couldn't get to them. And I think there were a lot more steps than I think we'd foreseen. So I think it just had to kind of end up as a guerrilla campaign. But we've heard from a lot of people that it helped, and that I did see kind of donations go up in the ones that were stickered and stuff. So hopefully we had some impact there.
Yeah, I think the problem is with a lot of these sort of big organisations, there's just so much red tape and that to filter through that it just becomes exhausting, that you just lose the will to live, don't you? But I've seen some of my local supermarkets, but they're normally just trolleys at the end, like a secondary thought. So it's a shame something like that wouldn't catch on. Is that something that's deep within you, the like the sort of social cause, using creativity for that, or was that just a one-off thing that you just felt passionate about? Or is it something like further down the line that you think you'd like to use your ability from a design perspective to change things?
Yeah, definitely. I love projects that have kind of creativity for good. And actually from that, I did talk to Hackney Food Bank for a little time about redoing their identity. But again, it kind of got held up in a bit of tape. So we'll see whether that happened. But it's interesting actually having that project has actually led to me being put on a lot more projects, even within organisations. So now I'm at JKR, I've actually been put on quite a lot of design for good within JKR, because they know that it's something I'm passionate about and something that I'll kind of take and run with. And also kind of I kind of think I'm more of a doer than necessarily like talk about it for a long time and then see what happens. So with something like that, you just kind of get on with it and see if it lands. And happy to help as well, which is the project I did in lockdown, was kind of a similar thing, like see if we can kind of create a change, but without thinking it through too much to start with.
I think you can sort yourself out of it, can't you? If you treat it like you would a client and you go through conceptualization and strategy and all that rest of it, you'll sort of think, actually, this might not work. By just sort of taking the bull by the horns, you sort of ride it and hope for the best. And I find that really exciting and really enthralling to sort of, to be at the front of that, because it can go in all sorts of directions, can't it? Which is,
yeah, there'll always be an issue with whatever you do, and someone's always going to be there to point it out. So might as well get on with it and make it happen before they can point out what's wrong with it.
Because I think I think that conversation is happening a lot more within agencies as well. Like things like B Corp status, there's a lot more conscious, a lot more people are conscious about the actions that are being taken outside of their control and trying to use it for better, don't we? Whether that's working with clients that are, also doing the right thing and not just putting money over people, or whether that's sort of current issues, cost of living crisis and all the other things that are going on. I think there's a lot of things we need to address. And I personally think creativity can be at the fore of that, and especially for something that always gets, I feel like it's always nudged out by governments and stuff, and less funding and all this sort of thing. I think we can go and prove our worth to those guys and make them sit up. Just had a couple of questions drop in from Kim and Kat, and they both touched upon the same things about your dad. And was he a good sounding board for when you were building your portfolio and supporting you in your career? Obviously, you touched on that so far with the awards, but anything else?
Yeah, he was really great. And, with my dad, because he co-founded a studio, so, he kind of knew everything, like he knew that whole process and all that stuff. And I think for him, it was never about kind of handing me anything, and it wasn't ever about me going to work for him or anything like that. But I think he was always there if I wanted advice, or if I wanted to know what he thought of an agency and things like that. He kind of had a bit of a finger on the pulse and knew kind of good agencies and bad agencies, which again, when you're at uni, you don't really have any vision of that. Like we were chatting before about how you get agencies come in and show you a top 10 of their most perfect projects, and you really have no idea if they're actually a good place to work or what they're doing. So I think for him to have a bit of that insider knowledge was super helpful. And yeah, he was helpful with my portfolio. I think I was always had a bit of that conflict of whether to kind of show him or not, in a way, and someone's so close to you that you almost have a bit of a block when you don't want to show them something and then tell you it's terrible. So I did have a bit of a kind of distance in certain respects and kind of listen to my tutors sometimes, but if I did want advice on a project, or if I got to a bit of a rut, he was always there, which was super helpful. And yeah, even now he likes to know what I'm up to, and kind of he's retired now, so I think he kind of gets a bit of vicarious design living through what I'm doing, which is quite nice. It
must have just been nice being in that creative environment, I presume. That I think it's hard to leave that with 9 to 5, isn't it? That sort of creeps into everyday life, doesn't it? The home environment. Yeah,
definitely.
What you do at the weekends and stuff. So it must have been nice just to have that around you subconsciously. I'm conscious of the time, Maisie, and there's something I really want to talk about as the sort of last point, is the work that we've seen of your self-initiated, especially seen on Instagram. Now, look, starting with the Think Food Back graphics, and then the things that we've shared, the over easy mixing illustration and type, which I adore. And I've noticed more recently, and Anna has noted it on the questions, about moving more into 3D, sort of cartoon, playful sort of work. Is that just a natural progression, experimentation? Is it just picking up from different things that you're involved with privately or within work time? Is that just a manifestation of all those things?
Yeah, so again, this is a kind of a byproduct of the pandemic. I feel like I've talked about the pandemic a lot, but yeah, it's been what's going on. So again, having had my Mac at home, so I was able to do some freelance work, so I was able to buy an iPad. So having an iPad really opened that up to me. It'd been ages, like I sketch for work, but it had been 10 years since I'd kind of sketched just for fun. It's really been since art at school, I think. I'd say it's quite rare for someone in the evening just to sit and get out a pencil and start kind of sketching. Whereas having my iPad there, it suddenly opened up this whole new world, and I could kind of sit on my sofa and watch some trash TV and sketch at the same time. And I think it really gave me that passion for drawing and being creative back again, which I'd started to lose. So yeah, I think having an iPad really did enable me to start doing things like that. And you start to see, my illustration, I'm trying to develop a style, but it's very difficult. And I think coming at it a bit late as well, and from a design sense, I'm very used to adapting my illustration style based on clients. So I've done quite a lot of illustrative work during my career, but it's always been, illustrating fruit on a fruit packet, or illustrating this in this certain way to match what the client wants. So suddenly when you're doing your own thing, it's very much like, what do I actually want to create, and what kind of makes me smile, or, and I think those kind of characters are something that I love doing. I love putting eyes on everything. I've got like my mug's just got eyes on, and just eyes everywhere in my room. So I think that kind of comes naturally to me. And then, Cinema 4D. So again, just super lucky that I went to JKR, and it's something I was interested in. I kind of want to keep learning and keep up with what's going on. And so I said, do you have any spare Cinema 4D licenses? And luckily, because they're a big agency, they did. They had a few going around. I said, would there any chance I could have one for a bit, see if I can kind of learn it? And so they just gave me the Cinema 4D license on my laptop, which again has been great because I can kind of sit in the evenings and just watch TV and mess around with it. And I've just been learning it through YouTube tutorials mainly, a lot of iDesign ones, which have been really useful. And again, just trying to put my spin on it. And I think I'm enjoying Cinema 4D a lot. I think it's something that I'd love to kind of get good at, but I don't ever see it being my career, because I think there's so many constraints that you have to do when you're doing something like that as your job, and always listen to the client briefs. And for me right now, it's something that I love doing, and it's something that I'm really excited to do in the evenings. And I think to have a creative hobby like that again is something that I've been really lacking. I'm not very crafty, like I can't knit, or I can't like paint, and I can't do anything actually tangible with my hands, but kind of digital stuff I enjoy a lot more. So it's kind of that, to me, it's that relaxing time in the evening. But it's great to have Instagram and kind of share it and get positive responses, and it kind of keeps me creating more, which I think is really good thing.
Yeah, and I think there's a tendency, once you come out of education and find a job, or a career in design, you sort of lose that, don't you? You sort of fill your time with doing client work, but I think it's really important to continually sort of learn new skills and keep your finger on the pulse, so to speak, because you never know when it's a bit like doing the Think Food, but you never know when the knowledge of that process, and not just the creative side of it, like they're trying to get products out to people, to try and communicate with supermarkets, to all these sort of things. They could come in really valuable at some point from working with a proper client, for instance, that having that pitching sort of process, all of those sort of things that we take for granted, but they're all built up over time, aren't they? Learning little bits and pieces here and there. So I think it's great. And I think I love the idea of using something like Instagram as a sort of scrapbook, as opposed to this highly polished sort of place like a portfolio. I think it's nice to see, because if you scroll down your profile, you can see that progression of different styles, approaches. It's all subjective, isn't it? Nothing's right or wrong. It's just nice to see different things. Yeah,
I'm trying really hard not to delete stuff, because it's that part of you that makes you want to curate everything all the time, doesn't it? It's like you want to seem perfect. You want to seem like just woke up one day and you could use Cinema 4D. Like, it's not realistic. And I love scrolling back down to the bottom of people's like Instagrams and seeing how they started out. So I'm like, I'm going to allow my workings there. But started Cinema 4D in September, and if you go back onto my Instagram, you can see the beginnings, and it's terrible. But I think it's great for me to have that marker in place and think that's where I was 6 months ago. Where can I be in 6 months' time? And for me personally, I really enjoy seeing that process. So
yeah, and I always say you don't get to the end of your career, and no one's ever completed design, have they? It's not a game. It's just it evolves endlessly. So it'd be great, and I look forward to seeing whatever comes through in future. I say, conscious of the time, I realise that's another click of her fingers and it's gone. I told you it would go fast. I really appreciate your time, Maisie. I hope everybody's enjoyed that and hearing your story.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been really good.
It's great just to expand on the things that you see on face value online, and profiles that traditionally tend to be quite professional spaces, don't they? And it's nice just to hear more in depth about what you've done. And like I say, it'd be great to speak to you in another 2 or 3 years to see where you're at then, and sort of see how the story's expanded. So I appreciate your time. Hope you have a great rest of the day. Hope everyone enjoyed that, and a great weekend too. We'll catch up again soon.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Ta-da.